What's the most disgusting thing you learned about your mother's past? My family plays this game called Sussy Family every Christmas. Simple rules. Everyone writes anonymous questions about family members on cards. Things like, who do you think still watches cartoons? Or, who probably has a secret candy stash? Then we take turns drawing cards and the whole family votes on who fits best. Points for correct guesses, drinks for wrong ones. Whoever gets the most votes has to answer if it's true. Started 5 years ago when my brother couldn't afford presents and made up this game instead. We loved it so much it became tradition. This Christmas started normally. Dad was doing his terrible DJ routine with the Bluetooth speaker. Mom kept adjusting everyone's plates so they were perfectly aligned. My older brother Darius brought his girlfriend, who nobody liked but pretended to. My younger brother Richard wore sunglasses inside claiming migraine, but reeking of weed. My sister Jenna kept checking her phone and crying, saying it was just a sad video she saw. First question, who's probably hiding debt? Everyone voted Dad because of his new car. He laughed it off, said it was a lease. We moved on. Second question, who lies about where they go? Split votes between Richard and Mom. Richard admitted he tells us he's at work when he's really at his girlfriend's place. Mom said nothing, just poured more wine. Third question, who's keeping a medical secret? Everyone looked at Jenna, who'd lost weight. She admitted to therapy for anxiety. We all hugged her. Still felt normal. Fourth question, who's not who they pretend to be? Everyone voted for Darius's girlfriend. She laughed nervously, but then Mom raised her hand. Actually, that's me. The room went quiet. Dad turned off his stupid Christmas playlist. Fifth question, who's been unfaithful? I watched my parents look at each other. Both raised their hands. My stomach dropped. Sixth question, who's been paying for hotels in cash? Mom again. Her hand shook as she raised it. Seventh question, who has a second phone? Mom. Dad's face was turning purple. Eighth question, who's been to the Marriott downtown more than 50 times this year? Mom didn't raise her hand this time. She just said, we need to stop. No, Dad said, pulling the next card himself. Who's been working evenings when they say they're at book club? Mom started crying. Not sad crying, defeated crying. Ninth question, who changes clothes in their car? Please, Mom whispered. 10th question, who has over $200,000 in a separate bank account? Mom stood up. Fine. You want to know? All of you clearly already know something. Darius pulled out his phone. I hired a PI, Mom, 3 months ago, because Jenna saw you at the Ritz-Carlton when you were supposedly at your sister's. And? Mom's voice was barely audible. Executive companions, Darius said. Active for 19 years, 3 to 4 clients per week, $1,500 per appointment. I thought I'd misheard. What? Your mother is a prostitute, Dad said flatly. Has been our entire marriage. The room exploded. Jenna ran to the bathroom. Richard started crying. Darius's girlfriend was recording everything until he grabbed her phone and threw it. It started before I met your father, Mom said, sitting back down like her legs gave out. I was broke. College debt, my mom's medical bills. It was supposed to be temporary. I was your client? Dad screamed. Tuesday afternoons, room 506. You like to talk about your dead brother. You were lonely. Sweet. You fell in love with someone who didn't exist. The kids, Richard said. Are we even his? Mom looked at the floor. Darius isn't. Darius is. A judge is. One who's now on the Supreme Court of Ohio. Darius walked out. Just left. We heard his car peel out. Richard is yours, she told Dad. Miracle baby. The only one. What about me? Jenna whispered from the doorway. Your real father is Dr. Smith, my gynecologist. I needed insurance to cover the pregnancy, so I seduced him. He paid me to keep quiet. I realized everyone was looking at me. What about me? You're Johnny's, Mom said quietly. Who's Johnny? Your basketball coach. He's been a client for 8 years. Started when you were 10. I threw up in the popcorn bowl. The same coach who drove me home from practice, who came to our family barbecues. Dad pulled out another card, hands trembling. Who's still active as an escort? Mom raised her hand. I have 3 appointments next week. One is your boss. Dad punched the wall. His hand went straight through the drywall. There's more, Mom said, pulling out a card from her pocket. This was my question. Who else in this family has been selling themselves? Everyone turned to look at each other. That's when Jenna raised her hand. Only fans, she whispered, for 2 years. That's how I paid for college. Then Richard raised his. Sugar mommy. The sunglasses are from him. So is the car. Darius's girlfriend walked back in, mascara streaking. Me too. That's how Darius and I met. I was his father's sugar baby first. Dad looked around the destroyed remains of our family. Anyone else? Any other intimacy workers I should know about? Grandma, who'd been silent in the corner, raised her hand. 1973 to 1981. How do you think I bought this house? Dad walked to the liquor cabinet, grabbed a bottle of scotch, and left. No coat, no keys, just walked out into the snow. Mom looked at us. The game was rigged. I wrote all the questions. I wanted it to end. All of it. Why? I managed to ask. Because I'm pregnant. And this time, I don't know whose it is. Could be any of 12 men. We all looked at each other, not knowing what to do next. I'm still standing in the living room trying to make my brain work when I realized Dad walked out into actual snow with no coat, and Mom just announced she's pregnant with maybe 12 different fathers. Jenna's crying sounds are coming from somewhere upstairs, or maybe the bathroom, and Richard's laugh has turned into this scary hiccup sob thing that won't stop. The Christmas tree lights are still blinking red and green over the wrapping paper mess, and the popcorn bowl I threw up in is sitting on the coffee table, and I can smell it. Mom's sitting at the dining table with her head in her hands, and Grandma's still in her corner chair watching all of us like she's waiting to see who breaks first. I check the front porch, and Dad's not there. Just the scotch bottle sitting on the step, half empty, with snow starting to cover it. His footprints go down the driveway into the street, and then they turn left toward the main road, and I can't see where they end. My hands shake when I pull out my phone to call him, but before I hit the button, I hear his ringtone coming from inside. I go back in and find his phone wedged between the couch cushions with 17 missed calls from work and 3 texts from someone saved as just the letter K. I don't open them because I don't want to know. Richard's still doing that hiccup sob thing in the kitchen, and when I walk past him to get to the bathroom, I can see his face is red and wet, and he's holding onto the counter like he might fall over. Jenna locked herself in the downstairs bathroom and won't answer when I knock. I can hear water running and her crying, and I sit down outside the door with my back against the wall. I tell her I'm not leaving until she talks to me and she doesn't answer, but the water turns off. I wait maybe 10 minutes checking my phone and seeing messages from cousins asking about Christmas plans like everything's normal, and then the lock clicks. She opens the door and her eyes are puffy and red, and I check her arms without asking, and there's nothing there. I make her give me her phone and she does without fighting, and we just sit on the bathroom floor together with our backs against the tub. She's shaking and I put my arm around her and we don't talk, because what would we even say? Richard's pacing around the kitchen island when we come out, and he's saying he's gonna beat Mom's butt, and this is so messed up over and over like a broken record. He gets louder each time and starts moving toward where Mom's sitting, and I physically step between them. He shoves past me hard enough that I stumble and heads for the back door, and I hear it slam. Through the window, I see him light up even though he told everyone he quit months ago. The smoke curls up into the porch light, and he's pacing back and forth in the snow in just his t-shirt. Mom's still at the dining table staring at her hands, and I make myself walk over and sit down across from her. I ask the practical stuff because someone has to, and my voice sounds weird and far away. How many weeks pregnant? She says 8 weeks. Does she have a doctor? She says yes, she has an OB. What's her actual plan here? She says she doesn't know yet, and her voice sounds like someone else's voice, flat and empty. I ask if she's keeping it, and she just looks at me and doesn't answer. Grandma stands up from her corner chair and announces that everyone's sleeping here tonight. She says the roads are iced over, and she's not having anyone die driving angry. Nobody argues with her, even though I want to leave so bad my chest hurts and I can barely breathe in this house. Jenna goes upstairs without a word, and I hear a door close. Richard's still outside smoking, and I can see him through the window doing another lap of the porch. I pull out my phone and text Darius asking where he went and if he's okay. No response. I text again 5 minutes later. Nothing. I send like 15 texts total over the next hour, asking him to just let us know he's alive, and finally his girlfriend responds. She says he peeled out of the neighborhood and isn't answering her either, and she doesn't know where he is. The fact that he just left us here makes me so angry I have to put my phone down before I throw it. I send Dad a text telling him to go to urgent care for his hand, because I saw bone when he pulled it out of the wall. I leave a voicemail about frostbite risk that sounds way calmer than I feel, and I tell him we have his phone and to please come back or at least let us know where he is. Richard comes back inside smelling like weed and cigarettes, and his eyes are bloodshot, and he goes straight to the guest room without looking at anyone. I hear the door lock. My phone rings, and it's Darius's girlfriend, and she's crying. She admits she filmed like 30 seconds on her phone before Darius grabbed it, and she already sent it to her group chat before she thought about it. My stomach drops, and I ask her how many people, and she says 5 girls, and they all saw it. I ask if they'll keep it quiet, and she says she doesn't know, and she's sorry, and she keeps crying. I hang up because I can't deal with her right now. This nightmare has witnesses outside the family now, and there's nothing I can do about it. My phone buzzes with a text from the neighbor 2 houses down. No words, just a photo of Dad sitting on the curb under a streetlight looking at nothing. He's still in just his shirt, and the street is covered in snow, and I can see his breath in the air. I grab my coat and Mom's car keys from the hook and walk down there in the snow to get him. He won't stand up when I get there, so I have to grab his good arm and pull him to his feet, and his whole body is shaking from the cold. His right hand looks wrong, swollen up purple and twice the normal size, and when I try to look at it closer, he pulls away and won't make eye contact. I get him into Mom's car and crank the heat all the way up, and his teeth are chattering so hard I can hear it over the engine. The nearest urgent care is 15 minutes away, and I drive there watching him stare out the window at nothing. Inside the waiting room smells like hand sanitizer, and there's a kid crying somewhere, and the receptionist makes Dad fill out paperwork with his left hand because his right one is useless. They take him back after 20 minutes, and I follow him into the exam room where a tired-looking doctor touches Dad's hand, and Dad makes this sound like a wounded animal. The doctor orders an x-ray, and we wait in this small room with posters about washing your hands, and Dad still won't look at me. When the x-ray tech comes back, she's gentle, moving his hand into position, but Dad's face goes gray, and he closes his eyes. The doctor comes back with the images on a tablet and points to where the bone is cracked and says it's probably a metacarpal fracture and needs a splint. Dad nods once, and the doctor asks if he wants pain pills, and Dad says no, and asks if he can leave tonight, and the doctor says yes, but he needs to follow up with orthopedics. They wrap his hand in this bulky splint that goes halfway up his forearm and give him a sheet about fracture care, and Dad crumples it in his left hand. I ask the doctor about frostbite risk, and she checks Dad's fingers and toes and says he got lucky. Just some mild exposure. Keep him warm. Dad refuses to go back to Grandma's house where Mom is, and I don't know what to do with him, so I just start driving. My phone starts going crazy in my pocket while we're sitting in the parking lot, and I pull it out and see a group text from Darius with like 30 messages already. He's sending screenshots one after another, hotel logs with dates and times going back years, phone records showing burner numbers with hundreds of calls, bank statements with cash withdrawals every Tuesday and Thursday for as long as the records go. The evidence just keeps coming, and I'm scrolling through it, and my stomach is turning over because it's all right there in black and white. There's a spreadsheet someone made tracking Mom's appointments by location and client codes and amounts, and it's so organized and detailed that I want to throw up again. Darius texts that Becca the PI found all of this over 3 months of surveillance and records requests, and it's just the summary. There's way more. I look over at Dad sitting there with his splinted hand, and I don't show him the phone because I don't think he can handle seeing it right now. Another text comes through with a photo of Mom's second phone, the burner one, and a list of contacts saved under fake names. I put my phone face down on my lap and just breathe for a minute before I start the car again. When we get back to the house, it's almost midnight, and Mom's still sitting in the same dining room chair like she hasn't moved at all. The living room is destroyed with wrapping paper and those game cards scattered everywhere and the hole in the wall where Dad's hand went through. I meet Mom's eyes across the room and her face is blank and empty, and I make myself walk over to her. I tell her tomorrow everyone's getting eye tests and making appointments for whatever else needs checking, and my voice sounds robotic and distant. She nods once without saying anything, and I turn around and walk away before I say something I can't take back. Dad goes straight to the spare bedroom and closes the door, and I hear the lock click. Richard's still outside smoking, and I can see him through the window doing another lap of the porch like he's been doing it for hours. Mom says something quiet, and I almost don't hear it, but I stop and turn around. She tells me she wrote all the question cards herself, every single one, and her voice is so small I have to move closer to hear. I ask her why she'd blow up the family in public like this instead of just telling us private, and she looks at me finally. She says she tried ending it private for years and it never stuck. She always went back to the work, always found a reason to keep going. She says she made it impossible to pretend anymore because pretending was killing her slower than the truth ever could. I don't know what to say to that, so I just stand there and she looks back down at her hands. She says she's sorry and I walk away because I can't do this right now. Grandma comes out of her room in her bathrobe and starts assigning sleeping spots like we're kids at a sleepover. She tells Jenna to take Mom's old room upstairs. Richard gets the basement, I get the couch, Dad has the spare room, Mom can sleep in the den. Nobody argues with her because Grandma's voice has this tone that means the discussion is over. I grab a blanket from the hall closet and lie down on the couch and stare at the ceiling for what feels like hours. The house makes settling noises, and I can hear someone crying somewhere, but I can't tell who. My brain won't shut up about worst-case scenarios, and finally I get up and walk upstairs to check that Jenna's still breathing. I open her door real quiet and see her curled up under the covers, and her chest is moving up and down, and I close the door again. I go back downstairs and lie on the couch, and eventually the sky starts getting light outside. Morning comes too fast, and I'm running on maybe 2 hours of sleep, but I make myself get up. I pull out my phone and start making a list of everything that needs handling today. Find Darius and make sure he's okay. Check Dad's hand and make sure he follows up with the doctor. Lock down the girlfriend's video before it spreads more. Schedule medical appointments for everyone. Figure out what the hell happens next. Richard stumbles upstairs from the basement looking gray and sick, and he goes straight to the bathroom without talking to anyone. Jenna won't come out of her room yet, and when I knock, she tells me to go away. I text Darius again asking him to please call us and talk this through. Mom's still in the den with the door closed. Dad comes out of the spare room holding his splinted hand and asks if there's coffee, and I make him some while he sits at the kitchen table staring at nothing. My phone finally rings, and it's Darius, and I answer on the first ring. He says he'll do a video call with everyone, including Becca the PI, if we can all get on at the same time. I get everyone gathered in the living room except Mom, who stays in the den, and I set up my laptop on the coffee table. Becca appears on screen first, professional looking with short dark hair and glasses, and then Darius joins from what looks like a hotel room. She starts walking us through what she found and what it means legally and financially, and her voice is calm and matter-of-fact, like she's discussing a business deal instead of our family falling apart. She explains the evidence in detail, the patterns she found, the financial trail, the client list she was able to partially reconstruct. Her professional tone makes everything feel more real somehow and worse because she's treating it like just another case. Becca pulls up documents on screen share and shows us Mom's separate bank account that's been active for 19 years. The deposits are regular and they match up with the hotel dates from the logs she found. She says there's risk to Dad's retirement accounts and possibly the house depending on how divorce law works with hidden assets and income. Dad's face on the screen looks like he aged 10 years overnight and his eyes are hollow. She explains that legally Mom might have claimed to half of everything, even though she was hiding income, and the house might have to be sold to divide assets fairly. Richard makes this choking sound next to me, and Jenna starts crying quiet tears that run down her face. Becca keeps talking about legal strategies and documentation, and I'm trying to focus, but my brain feels like static. Dad pulls out his phone with his left hand and steps away from the screen, and I hear him making a call. He comes back a few minutes later and says he got a lawyer named Ed Rogers that his work buddy recommended. He puts the call on speaker, and this guy Ed starts talking in this flat professional voice about not confronting Mom directly and starting to document everything for separation paperwork. The word separation lands in my chest like a rock, and I look over at Jenna, who's got her hands over her face. Ed talks about protecting assets and getting financial records and filing for legal separation before divorce, and it all sounds so final and real. Dad agrees to everything Ed says in this monotone voice, and they schedule a meeting for next week. When the call ends, nobody says anything for a long time. 3 days later, I'm at work trying to act normal and failing completely. My boss, Garrison Campbell, calls me into his office with this fake concerned face and asks if everything's okay with my family because he heard some rumors. The way he says it makes my skin crawl, and I realize he knows something specific. He sits too close, and his smile doesn't reach his eyes, and he says, "Workplace drama can affect positions here." I keep my face blank and neutral and tell him everything's fine, and he nods slow like he doesn't believe me. He mentions he'd hate to see my career affected by family issues, and the way he emphasizes family makes me want to punch him. I thank him for his concern and get out of his office as fast as I can, and my hands are shaking when I get back to my desk. 2 days later, Garrison calls me back into his office, and this time he doesn't even pretend to look concerned. He closes the door and sits in the chair next to mine instead of behind his desk, way too close, and I can smell his coffee breath. He starts talking about how workplace drama can really mess up someone's career trajectory here, and how he'd hate to see that happen to me specifically. The way he says it makes my skin crawl because he's not asking questions, he's making statements, and I realize he definitely knows something about Mom. I keep my face completely blank and reach into my pocket like I'm adjusting my phone, but I'm actually turning on the voice recorder app. He keeps going, saying things like how discretion is valued in this company, and how loyalty goes both ways, and how sometimes family issues need to stay private for everyone's benefit. I just nod and let him talk, watching his face get more comfortable as he thinks I'm agreeing with him. He mentions that he's noticed I seem distracted lately, and maybe I need some time to get my head straight, and the threat in his voice is so obvious now that I almost laugh. I tell him I appreciate his concern, and I'll definitely think about what he said, and he smiles this gross, satisfied smile and pats my shoulder before I leave. My phone's been recording the whole thing, and when I check later, it caught everything clear as day. That same evening, Jenna shows up at my apartment without calling first, and she looks terrible, eyes all red and puffy. She sits on my couch and pulls out her phone with shaking hands and shows me these DMs from an account I don't recognize. Someone found her real identity from her OnlyFans somehow, probably through some detail she didn't blur out enough, and they're threatening to send everything to her college administration and our extended family unless she pays them $5,000. The messages are detailed and specific, listing her cousin's names and her academic advisor, and even grandma's address, and Jenna's whole body is trembling as she scrolls through them. I want to find whoever this person is and break their face, just completely lose it on them. But I force myself to stay calm and screenshot everything instead. She's been getting these messages for 3 days and hasn't told anyone because she's terrified and ashamed and doesn't know what to do. I tell her we're going to handle this, but she's not paying anything, and I start researching what to do about online blackmail while she curls up on my couch crying. The next day, Richard calls me sounding weird and asks if he can come over, and when he shows up, he looks like he hasn't slept. He sits at my kitchen table and just starts talking fast, admitting that the car he's been driving isn't actually his, it belongs to his sugar mommy arrangement. And he's been getting repo notices for weeks because he can't make the payments she expects him to cover now. He also owes her money for rent she covered the last 2 months, and some other expenses he won't specify, and his voice cracks when he tells me the total is around $8,000. She's been texting him constantly demanding payment or threatening to report the car stolen, and he's completely stuck because he doesn't have the money and can't get a loan and can't ask Mom or Dad right now. I ask him why he didn't come to me sooner, and he just shakes his head and says he thought he could handle it himself. We sit there figuring out options and none of them are good, but at least he's finally talking about it instead of pretending everything's fine. My phone buzzes with a group text from Darius, and I open it expecting more PI reports. But instead, it's just a message saying he needs to tell us something. He explains that when he was 16, he started asking Mom questions about his dad, just normal, curious teenager stuff about why he looked different from us and whether his biological father was around. Mom shut him down hard every time. But once the judge who's his biological father pulled him aside at some court event where Darius was volunteering and told him very clearly to forget his curiosity about his mother's past. At the time, Darius thought it was just weird and dropped it. But now it makes horrible sense that the judge was protecting himself and probably threatening consequences if Darius pushed harder. The text ends with Darius saying he feels stupid for not seeing it back then, and I reply that he was just a kid and had no reason to suspect anything that messed up. A few hours later, Becca sends another report through email, this one longer and more detailed than the last. She's found patterns in Mom's client list that suggest some of them might have been pressuring her or using some kind of leverage to keep her working. There are gaps in the hotel records that match up with times when Mom seemed extra stressed at home, times I remember her being jumpy and distracted and weird. Becca thinks we should look into possible blackmail because the pattern is too consistent to be random, and she's flagged 3 clients specifically who seem to have unusual hold over Mom's schedule. The report includes dates and transaction amounts and notes about Mom's behavior patterns, and reading through it makes me feel sick because it means Mom might not have been as in control of this situation as we thought. I forward it to Darius and we agree to talk to Mom about it carefully without making her feel more trapped. Mom goes to her OBGYN Kirsten Maldonado for the first appointment about the pregnancy the following week, and she texts me after saying it went okay. Dr. Maldonado ordered a full STI panel and talked through all her options without pushing any particular direction, which Mom appreciated because she's still figuring out what she wants to do. When she comes home to Grandma's house, she looks completely exhausted, dark circles under her eyes and moving slow like everything hurts. She tells us she's got another appointment in 2 weeks for follow-up and more tests, and she needs to decide about continuing the pregnancy before it gets too far along. Nobody knows what to say, so we just nod and let her go. Rest in the den, and the weight of everything she's carrying feels heavier than ever. Later that week, Grandma calls a family meeting at her house, and when we're all sitting in her living room, she pulls out this old ledger from 1975. The pages are yellowed and the handwriting is careful and neat, showing dates and amounts in columns that clearly track some kind of income. She explains that she kept these records when she was working to pay rent after Grandpa left and her mom got sick, back when she had no other options and needed to survive. She talks about how shame kept her silent for 40 years, but silence didn't actually protect anyone. It just let the hurt grow bigger in the dark. When she says this, she looks directly at Mom, and Mom's face crumbles a little, but she doesn't look away. Grandma says she's not judging anyone, but she's done watching her daughter and grandkids destroy themselves trying to keep secrets that are already out. Dad officially moves his stuff into Grandma's spare room over the weekend, and the house feels completely wrong with his chair empty at the dinner table. We try eating together once without him, just Mom and us kids gathered around like normal, but it's so awkward and forced that nobody can pretend it's okay. Jenna starts crying halfway through, and we all just look at each other not knowing what to do, and eventually we give up and go to separate rooms. The house feels too big and too quiet now, like something essential got ripped out and left a hole nobody knows how to fill. I end up leaving early and driving around for an hour because being there hurts too much. I get a DM on Instagram from an account I don't recognize, just a random string of numbers and letters for the username. When I open it, there are old photos attached, pictures of Mom and Coach Johnny at our family barbecues from years ago. In every photo, they're standing too close, his hand on her back or her shoulder, both of them smiling in a way that looks different now that I know the truth. The message underneath says, "Thought you should know your real dad's been around the whole time," and I feel physically sick staring at my phone screen. These are photos from events I remember, cookouts and birthday parties where Johnny was just our family friend and my coach, and now every memory is poisoned. I delete the message and block the account, but the images are burned into my brain and I can't stop seeing them. I drive to Coach Johnny's house the next day without telling anyone where I'm going. His address is still in my phone from when he used to drive me home from practice, and I pull up to his driveway and sit there for a minute, trying to decide if this is stupid. Then I get out and walk up to his porch and knock hard, and when he opens the door, his face goes white. He tries to smile and act normal, asking if I want to come in, but I stay on the porch and just start talking. He immediately goes defensive, saying the lines were always clean, and he supported our family financially, and he cares about me like a son. I cut him off and tell him he paid to sleep with my mom while pretending to mentor me. That's not support. That's sick and manipulative and disgusting. He tries to argue, but I'm already turning away and walking back to my car, hands shaking so bad I can barely get my keys out. I leave before I do something I'll actually regret, and I drive home with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. I get home and go straight to my laptop and pull up the school district website. There's a form under Report a Concern, and I click it and stare at the blank fields for a minute. My hands shake when I start typing. I write that Coach Johnny has a conflict of interest with a player's family, that there are boundary violations, that the relationship is inappropriate. I don't say escort or mom or anything specific, just enough that someone will look into it. When I get to the submit button, I have to stop and breathe because once I hit it, there's no taking it back. I click submit anyway and close my laptop fast like that'll make it less real. The next morning, I drive across town to a clinic I found online where nobody knows me. The waiting room has those plastic chairs that stick to your legs and magazines from 2 years ago. I fill out paperwork asking about sexual history and risk factors, and I check boxes that make me want to disappear. When the nurse calls my name, I follow her back, and she's maybe 50 with kind eyes, and she doesn't ask questions beyond what's medically necessary. She tells me the blood draw will be quick, and I focus on her voice explaining the timeline for results. She says most people get answers in 3 to 5 days, and I nod like that's fine, even though waiting feels impossible. Mom catches me in the kitchen that afternoon when I'm making coffee. She pulls me into the hallway and her voice drops to almost nothing. She says one of her clients paid her $20,000 3 years ago to stay quiet after his wife almost found out. She's scared of what he'll do if his name comes out now, if there's legal stuff, or if I talk to anyone. I see actual fear in her face, not the defeated look from Christmas, but real terror like she thinks he might hurt her. I tell her I'm not planning to expose anyone, but I also can't promise to protect people I don't know. She nods and walks away, and I pour my coffee with hands that won't stay steady. That night, Darius calls me, and we end up talking for almost 2 hours. He asks if he should contact the judge directly or just let it go, if knowing changes anything or makes it worse. For the first time since Christmas, we sound like actual brothers instead of strangers dealing with the same nightmare. I tell him to document everything first before making any moves, get copies of the PI report, maybe talk to a lawyer about what his options are. He says that's smart and thanks me, and his voice cracks a little. We hang up, and I sit there feeling like maybe something good came out of all this, even if it's just me and Darius actually talking. Dad calls me the next day and says Ed Rogers warned him about talking publicly. If Dad says anything about Mom's work, he could face defamation claims, so the strategy is focusing on asset division and keeping personal details out of court filings. Dad sounds defeated when he agrees, but also relieved to have a clear plan, like someone finally told him what to do. I tell him that makes sense, and we hang up, and I wonder if keeping quiet is protecting Mom or protecting her clients or just making everything worse. At work on Monday, Garrison corners me in the break room when I'm getting water. He stands too close and asks how my family's doing with this fake concerned smile. Then he says a raise might be coming my way if I'm a team player about family discretion. The way he says team player makes my skin crawl. I turn on my phone's voice recorder in my pocket before I respond, and I smile back and say, I'll think about it. He pats my shoulder and walks away, and I want to throw up, but I got the whole conversation on audio. I meet with Becca later that week at a coffee shop, and she explains that prenatal paternity testing exists, but with 12 possible fathers, it's not practical. Getting DNA samples from all of them means contacting clients Mom's trying to protect, which creates legal and safety issues. The logistics are basically impossible, and we're stuck not knowing until the baby's born. Becca says she's sorry, and I believe her, but it doesn't change anything. We sit there drinking coffee that tastes like nothing while she goes through options that aren't really options at all. Mom spends the next few days going back and forth about whether to continue the pregnancy. She sits at Grandma's kitchen table staring at nothing, and sometimes crying, and sometimes just breathing. We all agree not to pressure her either way, but we insist she needs counseling and medical safety. Richard actually steps up and finds a therapist who specializes in this stuff, and Mom schedules an appointment. After she goes the first time, she seems a little less fragile, like maybe talking helped or maybe just having a plan helped. I'm at Grandma's house 3 days later when I hear Jenna making these awful sounds from upstairs. I run up and she's on the floor hyperventilating and clawing at her chest like she can't breathe. I kneel down and talk her through breathing, counting out loud, telling her to focus on my voice. Mom appears in the doorway, and for a second I think Jenna will freak out more, but Mom just sits down and holds her. They don't say anything, just cry together on the floor, and it's the first time they've touched since Christmas. I leave them there and go downstairs, and Grandma hands me a beer without asking. Richard's in Mom's room at Grandma's house later that week, and I walk in to find him taking cash from her purse. He freezes when he sees me and tries to play it off, but I grab his wrist and the money falls. We get into a screaming fight right there, me yelling about stealing and him yelling about needing it, and neither of us making sense. I threaten to call the cops, and he breaks down completely. He admits he owes $8,000 total between the sugar mommy and some other debts he won't name. I sit down on the bed and we make a payment plan together, writing it out on notebook paper like a contract. He signs it and I sign it, and we don't talk about the fact that we both just cried. 2 days later, Grandma calls everyone to the living room and makes us sit down like we're kids again. She's holding papers from her lawyer, and her face has that look she gets when she's made up her mind about something. She says she's putting the house in a trust that excludes Mom if she keeps escorting, and Mom's face goes completely white like someone punched her. Grandma keeps talking in this calm voice about how it's not punishment, it's protection, and if Mom gets real help and stops working, she'll reconsider the whole thing. Mom doesn't say anything. just stares at the coffee table while tears run down her face. Richard shifts in his seat, and Jenna picks at her nails, and nobody knows what to say. I visit Dad at Grandma's spare room the next afternoon and find him sitting on the bed staring at old photos on his phone. We sit there for a while not talking, and then he starts telling me about his brother who died when Dad was 19 in a car accident. He says he was so lonely after that, like a piece of him died too, and that's when he started going to hotel bars just to be around people. He met Mom in that hotel room on a Tuesday, and she listened to him talk about his brother for 2 hours, and he fell in love with someone who didn't actually exist. His voice cracks when he says he doesn't know how to stop loving her anyway, even though she was never real. I don't know what to say, so I just sit there with him. Darius's girlfriend shows up at Grandma's door 3 days later, looking like she hasn't slept, and asks to talk to all of us. We sit in the kitchen, and she confesses that she used to be his father's sugar baby before she met Darius. That's actually how they connected in the first place, because she knew the family. Her hands shake when she talks, and Mom looks sick. Darius gets up and walks out without saying a word, and his girlfriend starts crying and leaves right after. He shows up at Grandma's garage later that night looking completely empty, and we drink beer sitting on the concrete floor not talking much. I hand him another beer and he takes it, and we just sit there. Mom's phone buzzes during dinner 2 nights later, and she looks at it and her whole body goes stiff. She shows us the message with shaking hands, and it's from one of her clients saying if she stops seeing him, he'll go public with details and names and everything. The fear on her face makes my chest hurt, and suddenly we're all looking at each other realizing this isn't just Mom's problem anymore. Richard asks what we're supposed to do, and nobody has an answer. I call Becca the next morning, and she comes over with a notebook and starts making lists. We change the locks on all of Grandma's doors and get Mom a new phone number, and Becca shows us how to document every threat with screenshots and dates. She says Mom can't meet any clients alone or unknown anymore, and we need to treat this like building a fortress 1 brick at a time. Mom agrees to everything and actually seems relieved to have rules. Monday, my boss Garrison pulls me aside and tells me my schedule is getting cut to 3 days a week because of budget stuff, but his face says otherwise. In the next meeting, he talks over me when I'm presenting, and later he tells someone else my idea was his. I start keeping a notebook with dates and times of every incident, and my hands shake writing it down, but I do it anyway. I'm building a case even though I'm scared of what happens when I actually file it. I find a therapist named Amara through my insurance and book the first appointment for Thursday. When I sit down in her office, she asks what brings me in, and I tell her I don't know who I am anymore now that I found out my basketball coach is my biological father. She asks me who I was before Christmas, and I open my mouth to answer, but nothing comes out. That's when I start actually crying and can't stop for like 10 minutes. She just sits there and waits and hands me tissues. Ed calls Dad the following week and says the paperwork is ready for legal separation and temporary financial orders to freeze the joint accounts. Dad signs everything with his left hand because his right is still in a splint and his signature looks wrong. Mom gets served with papers at Grandma's house by some guy in a suit, and she just stares at them for a long time without opening the envelope. Richard takes it from her and reads it out loud, and Mom sits down hard in the kitchen chair. Dr. Maldonado's office calls Mom 2 days later, asking her to come in for an urgent follow-up because some test results show high-risk indicators for the pregnancy. Mom needs more frequent monitoring now, and suddenly she's got appointments every week instead of every month. She comes home from that appointment and tells us she's stopping all client work completely because the stress is too dangerous for the baby. Her voice sounds defeated but also relieved. Jenna comes downstairs that same night and says she's pausing her OnlyFans account, and her face is pale when she talks about losing her main income. She doesn't know how she'll pay for college next semester, and her voice gets higher and tighter. I tell her we'll figure it out and pull up the financial aid website on my laptop. We spend 3 hours filling out emergency aid applications and campus work study forms, and when we finish, she hugs me so tight I can barely breathe. The next day, I text Amara asking if she does family sessions, and she responds within an hour saying yes and sends me available times. I book one for the following week and send the details to everyone in a group text with just the address and time and no explanation. Mom responds first saying she'll be there, and then Dad replies asking what this is about, and I type back that we need ground rules if we're going to keep talking to each other. Richard sends a thumbs up and Jenna hearts the message, and Darius leaves it on read, but I know he saw it. The day of the session, we all show up at different times and sit in Amara's waiting room, avoiding eye contact until she calls us back to this bigger room with a circle of chairs. She starts by saying everyone gets to speak without interruption, and if someone breaks that rule, the session ends immediately, and we all nod. Mom goes first and admits she's been lying for 19 years, and she understands if we never forgive her, but she wants to try being honest now. Dad goes next, and his voice shakes when he says he feels like he never knew the woman he married, and he doesn't know how to stop loving someone who doesn't exist. Jenna talks about feeling unsafe in her own body after the OnlyFans stuff, and Richard admits he's been using humor to avoid dealing with anything real. I tell them I don't know who I am anymore now that Coach Johnny is my biological father, and Darius stays quiet the whole time, just listening. Amara asks what we need from each other going forward, and Mom says she needs us to let her prove she can change, and I say we need honesty even when it hurts. By the end, we agree to no more games with hidden agendas and no ambushing each other, and everyone gets their turn to talk. Amara asks Mom if she'll commit to individual therapy, and Mom says twice a week and actually writes it in her phone calendar right there in front of us. Dad starts seeing his own counselor the following week and calls me after his first session sounding exhausted. He tells me the scotch bottle on Christmas wasn't the first time he's drunk alone this year, and there've been other nights when he sat in his car in parking lots finishing a bottle before going into Grandma's house. His voice sounds different when he talks about it, not defensive or angry, just tired and honest in a way I've never heard before. He says his counselor wants him to set small goals instead of making big promises he can't keep, so he's starting with not drinking alone and checking in with someone every day. I tell him I'll be his check-in person if he wants, and he's quiet for a minute before saying yes. I spend 3 days building my HR complaint with timestamps and dates and descriptions of every incident with Garrison. My hands shake when I attach the audio files where he hints about knowing Mom's work and suggests a raise for my silence. I write that I'm requesting a neutral third party to oversee my case because Garrison is my direct supervisor and there's a clear conflict of interest. The submit button sits there on my screen for like 10 minutes before I finally click it and watch the confirmation message appear. My stomach drops immediately after like I just jumped off something high. Becca calls me 2 days later and says she found something I need to see. We meet at a coffee shop and she slides a folder across the table with copies of Mom's client records going back 4 years. Garrison's name appears every month, sometimes twice, always on weekday afternoons when he claims to be in meetings. She's highlighted the dates in yellow and cross-referenced them with my work calendar, showing times when he called me into his office right after seeing Mom. The pattern makes me feel sick, but also less helpless because now I have actual leverage if HR tries to sweep this under the rug. Becca walks me through the chain of command options and what to do if the first complaint gets ignored, and I take notes on everything. The HR rep emails me asking for a meeting, and I show up at the conference room on the 3rd floor with printed copies of everything. She's younger than I expected with a tablet and a recorder, and she starts by saying, "This is a preliminary fact-finding conversation." I stay completely factual about the bribery attempt and the schedule cuts and the undermining in meetings without mentioning Mom's name beyond saying a family member's private work history became known to my supervisor. She takes notes and asks clarifying questions and says they'll investigate, and I walk out feeling exposed but also steady, like I did what I needed to do. Mom cancels all her remaining client appointments over the next week, and the income drops to 0 immediately. She has a panic attack at Grandma's house, hyperventilating about bills and insurance, and how she'll pay for the pregnancy appointments. Grandma sits her down at the kitchen table and offers to cover necessities temporarily, but only if Mom sticks with therapy twice a week and keeps all her medical appointments with Dr. Maldonado. Mom agrees, and Grandma writes her a check right there for $2,000 and tells her this is temporary help, not a permanent solution. The tension in Mom's shoulders releases a tiny bit after that. Richard's car gets repossessed from Grandma's driveway on a Tuesday morning, and he comes inside looking gray and shaky. The repo guy just hooked it up and drove away, while Richard stood there in his pajamas, and now he's got no way to get to his fake job that isn't actually a job. I find him on the back porch smoking, and he tells me he's going to start doing DoorDash and Uber to make actual money, and he sounds defensive like he expects me to make fun of him. I tell him I'll match whatever he earns if he keeps it up for a month, and he calls me a jerk, but pulls out his phone and starts the driver application right there. 3 days later, he shows me his first week earnings of $300, and I Venmo him $300 more, and he doesn't say thank you, but he keeps working. Darius texts me saying he's meeting with the judge at some lawyer's office downtown, and he sounds nervous about it. I tell him to record everything on his phone just in case, and he sends back a thumbs up. 2 hours later, he texts saying the judge offered him money and connections for law school if Darius stays quiet about paternity and never contacts him again. The judge called it a mutually beneficial arrangement and suggested Darius think about his future career carefully. Darius recorded the whole conversation on his phone and walked out without agreeing to anything. His next text says he feels free for the first time, like he's not carrying around this secret that's been choking him. I tell him I'm proud of him, and he responds with just a heart emoji, but I know he means it. Grandma officially updates her estate plan on Thursday and announces it at Sunday dinner to avoid surprises later. She's leaving the house in a trust that requires Mom to stay clean from escort work for 5 years before she can inherit her share, and if Mom goes back, the house goes entirely to us kids. Mom gets upset and her face goes red, and she starts to argue but then stops herself and takes a breath and says she understands. Grandma explains it's not punishment, it's protection for everyone including Mom, and the tension releases a little bit after that. We eat the rest of dinner in silence, but it's not the terrible kind of silence, just people thinking their own thoughts. My STI panel results come back negative for everything, and the clinic calls me on my cell while I'm at work. I take my break early and sit in my car in the parking lot reading the text with the results link, and I start crying from pure relief. It doesn't fix the trust issues or the identity stuff or any of the big problems, but it's one less thing to be terrified about. I sit there for 20 minutes just breathing and letting myself feel something good for the first time in weeks. I spend the next week checking my email every hour waiting for something from the school district about my complaint against Coach Johnny. When the letter finally comes, it's just a plain white envelope with the district logo and one page inside saying they received my report and placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. No drama, no phone calls, just a memo that probably went to the whole athletic department. I read it 3 times sitting in my car before work, and I feel this weird empty feeling like I thought winning would fix something inside me, but it doesn't. The vindication is real, but it sits in my chest like a rock instead of relief. I forward the email to Darius, and he responds with a thumbs up, and that's it. Like we both know this doesn't actually solve anything about who I am or what happened. At work, nobody mentions it, and I don't bring it up because what would I even say? Thursday morning, Mom calls me from Grandma's house saying she's having cramps and bleeding, and her voice sounds scared in a way I've never heard before. I leave work early without explaining and drive straight to the ER where they're already hooking her up to monitors and checking the baby's heartbeat. The waiting room has that hospital smell that makes everything feel worse, and I text the family group chat that Mom's here and needs monitoring. Jenna shows up first and sits next to me without talking, just scrolling her phone and bouncing her leg. Richard comes during his lunch break with a stack of magazines he grabbed from the grocery store checkout and leaves them on the chair next to Mom's bed. Darius texts asking for updates every hour, and I send him short responses like, "Still waiting," and "Baby's heartbeat is okay." We rotate through in shifts because the room's too small for everyone, and nobody says the word forgive, but we're all there anyway. When I sit with Mom, she doesn't look at me, just watches the monitor screen, and I realize this is what family looks like now, broken people showing up because that's what you do. Saturday afternoon, Jenna knocks on my door and asks if I want to get coffee, and I say yes because she never asks for anything. We sit in her car in the Starbucks parking lot, and she tells me she had a conversation with Mom alone in Mom's room at Grandma's house the night before. I wait for her to say they talked about the escort work or the pregnancy or something heavy, but she says they just talked about normal stuff like what Mom's been eating and if she's sleeping okay. Jenna's voice cracks when she says it felt like having a mom again just for 20 minutes, like before everything exploded and we all became strangers living in the same broken story. I don't know what to say, so I just nod and we finish our coffee in silence and drive back separately. Monday morning, I get called into HR and my stomach drops thinking they're firing me, but instead they tell me Garrison resigned over the weekend with no public explanation. The HR rep says my complaint was taken seriously and appropriate action was taken, and they're sorry for any workplace discomfort I experienced. I keep my job and my same desk, but some of my coworkers won't look at me in meetings anymore, and I hear snitch whispered when I walk past the break room. The relief of Garrison being gone is huge and real, but the loneliness at work is also real, like I traded one problem for a different one. I eat lunch in my car now instead of the cafeteria, and I tell myself it's worth it, but some days I'm not sure. Dad texts the family group saying he and Mom have their first settlement conference scheduled for Wednesday and asks if any of us want to be there. Nobody responds, and I think that's answer enough. I don't go, but Dad tells me later it was tense but professional with both their lawyers present, and nobody yelled, which felt like progress. They traded drafts of asset division, and Mom agreed to full financial transparency going forward with all her accounts, and Dad agreed to keep health insurance active for her and the baby. Dad sounds tired when he tells me this over the phone, and I realize how much energy it takes to legally separate from someone you thought you'd be with forever. Sunday, we have dinner at Grandma's table, and it's the plainest meal we've had in months, just spaghetti and bread with no music playing and no games. We leave a chair open for Darius, even though we all know he's not coming and nobody mentions it out loud. Halfway through dinner, Darius texts a picture of his takeout container to the group chat with "miss you guys," and Richard sends back a middle finger emoji, but he's smiling when he does it. Jenna laughs for the first time in weeks, and even Mom's mouth twitches like she wants to smile too. It's not forgiveness, and it's not fixed, but it's something. Tuesday, Mom signs paperwork agreeing to paternity testing after the baby's born, and she tells us she's keeping it no matter whose it is. She says she's looking for a regular job now, maybe at a call center or doing medical billing from home, something stable that doesn't involve hotels or clients. I tell her I don't need to know everything about her past, and she starts crying right there at the kitchen table and says, "Thank you," over and over. I don't hug her, but I stay sitting there until she stops, and that feels like enough for now. 10 weeks after Christmas, I'm sitting in Amara's office talking about how everyone landed in different places, and some things still hurt, and probably always will. Dad's living at Grandma's and working on his drinking. Mom's 7 months pregnant and working part-time data entry from home. Richard's still doing delivery apps and paying down his debt slowly. Jenna's back at the school with financial aid covering most of it. Darius texts more now but hasn't visited yet. I tell Amara I'm choosing to show up for my future sibling without pretending the past is clean or simple. She asks me who I am now, and I say I don't have answers yet, but I'm learning that family is what you build after everything breaks. Maybe that's enough for now, maybe it's not, but it's what I've got, and I'm trying to be okay with that. Yeah, so that's basically the whole messy situation. Pretty wild ride, huh? If you made it this far, might as well subscribe, right? I've got more stories coming your way. Take it easy out there, and I'll see you around.